Guten Morgen, good morning, and welcome to the Martens Center Sideline program here at the EPP Congress live from Rotterdam. I'm Sandra Pasaric, and I have the pleasure of guiding you through this 2 days program with extremely engaging and up-to-date discussions. As we are celebrating the 27th EPP Congress, co-hosted by the Dutch Christian Democratic Union, the CDU, also a founding member of the EPP, we are led by a mission to redefine and reaffirm our fundamental values. As the EPP's official think tank, the Wilfried Martens Center for European Studies will contribute to this mission by addressing some of the most pressing issues here in Europe. Under the title United for Europe, we aim at bringing you some of the most important and relevant political representatives who will discuss in sharp discussions. Some of the topics we will be exploring include the EU's economy, European climate ambitions, united European security and defense system, and EU's readiness for the digital decade. Just to mention a few and give you a little bit of the flavor what's coming at you in the next 2 days. During today and tomorrow, we will have a total of 9 brief panel discussions of the duration of 30 minutes each. You can follow us live on our YouTube channel or on our official Martens Center website, martencenter.eu. I would also like to invite you to join the debate by leaving your comments on your social media accounts, and don't forget to use the hashtag United for Europe or one of the 2 official EPP hashtags, hashtag EPP Congress and hashtag We Stand with Democracy. With this said, I'd like to introduce to you our first panel for the day, Christian Democracy and the Centre-Right. The first panel will be moderated by André Poortman, researcher at the CDAbResearch Institute, whom I now give the floor.
Okay. Hello everyone and welcome. In this panel we will discuss the future of Christian democracy in Europe. Yes. Last year the Wilfried Martens Center and the Research Institute of the CDA published this wonderful book, Seeing Europe Anew. It's available at our stand. In the book, 9 relative young politicians are interviewed. They are all members of parties affiliated with the EPP. And in this panel we will reflect on some of the issues that are discussed in the book. Next to me are my guests, and they will share their thoughts with you and me. First, I introduce to you Arjen Siegmann, professor of valuable work and Christian social thinking at Vrije Universiteit, Amsterdam, also research associate of the Research Institute of the CDA. And on my other side is Tom Berendsen, member of European Parliament and one of the participants in the book Seeing Europe Anew. So welcome you both.
Thanks.
And it's an all-male panel to start with.
Yes, and I promised not to participate anymore in all-male panels. But since I understood that of all the people that were interviewed for this book, all the women were not here or not available at this time, I will accept the invitation. I'm really looking forward to the discussion.
Very nice to have you here. And Tom, to start with you with the topic we want to discuss, what exactly makes you a Christian Democrat? And more in general, perhaps, what makes somebody a Christian Democrat?
Yeah, well, for me, choosing for CDA, for the Christian Democratic Party in the Netherlands, I think was mostly based on the values I was brought up with. When I was young, my parents always told me, take some responsibility, take responsibility over yourself, but also take responsibility for, if you can, for something bigger than yourself. So I was raised in a football club. I played there first, and then afterwards, and when I was 19, 20, I was in the board of the football club, and a football club is like a little society at itself. Yeah. So I took a bit of responsibility there, and that's also what I think Christian democracy is about. If you look at the 3rd letter of CDA, our Dutch party, it stands for appel, to call upon people to take responsibility for a bit more than yourself. And I think that is, for me, that's one of the main values of Christian democracy, is that we take responsibility also for the common good and for a bit more than the individual.
So Christian democracy is about values and foremost and responsibility.
Yes.
How does it sound to you, Arjen?
Cool.
Cool.
Sounds good.
Just cool.
Now, when you I recognize that also the question. I think it's something if you work at the research institute, like CDA, and when you start working there, it's the question you ask yourself because people ask you like, what is Christian democracy? And you start reading, and you start writing stuff about it. But then years later, you think, well, actually, it's not that complicated. It's like seeing other people as a family. I think that's the idea. It's like when you're with other people of kind of within the party or within the EPP, you notice that you have something in common. It's like a family feeling, and it's also something that's also our political philosophy, I guess. That we see other countries and other people as relatives. And that's kind of I think that's kind of the straightforward thing. Yeah. And the words are important, but maybe it's also just what it is. And that's great.
I like your let's say family metaphor because also I think in a family you're together. You need to do it together. You need to act together, and that means you also need to listen to the others. You need to put yourself in the perspective of others. And I think that's also a very valuable thing of Christian democracy, is that we try to listen also to people with another perspective and try to be the bridge builders. Although that is also our challenge. Yeah. Because if you're a bridge builder all the time and you present the compromise as your own IDs, then it's difficult in a political landscape to be recognized also by voters. Although I think in the polarized society as we see today, bridge builders are incredibly important.
What is the polarization you see?
I think the polarization you see is, I think in general, you see people that are successful in all the developments we see in our world, globalization, economic growth, etc. And secondly, you see people that do not benefit from all these things that apparently are good. And if you combine that with, let's say, the role of social media, where me as an individual, I see that everyone has a great life and a perfect life, and if I do not...
it looks like that.
It looks like
that.
Yeah. You only see the great pictures, and you also only the great stories. And then if you live in a village, for example, or in a part of the city where the doctor left, where the municipality, there's no face anymore, it's only digital, where shops are leaving, where you don't recognize anymore your own neighborhood. I think that's a part of the polarization we see at the moment, that people that are happy with all the developments we consider as good, globalization, internationalization, international cooperation, economic growth, and people that do not benefit from that. And I think that's also up to us as Christian Democrats to make sure that we also build a bridge there between the people that benefit and the people that do not benefit.
Cool. Yeah, I think I agree. And I'm thinking about the interesting thing about the family metaphor is that you think of family, when we say it, that we think, oh, that's all this fuzzy, warm feeling. But if you look at the reality of families, it's usually not very warm and fuzzy. There are conflicts and stuff. And I think if you see that...
But people can handle that in the family.
We can handle it because we are family. And I think this helps us to maybe overcome some of these problems, like some divides, but maybe also like north-south divides in Europe, maybe west-east divides. Sometimes they are there, political tensions. And then you notice, I think there are some ongoing issues, isn't it? With human rights, press freedom, like in Poland and Hungary. And what I notice is that people in our family understand that is an issue. That doesn't mean that some people are bad. And the people who are from another political conviction usually have a hard time understanding that. Do you know what I mean? Do you recognize that? Because they would demonize or like say, well, these people are just bad, throw them out. And you say, well, you don't do that with your mother or your uncle. It's just that, you try to stay on speaking terms, your family.
But I think that's European cooperation in a nutshell. Yeah. I mean, sitting together around the table is crucial. Yeah. And no matter how much you disagree on some points, we have a common future. We have common challenges, international challenges, safety and security, energy transition, migration. And we need to do that together. And then for that, you need to sit around the table together. And that's what we need to continue to do together. And that means that you do not agree all the time, but that you continue to have the conversation. But in my belief, also as Christian Democrats, be very firm on what our basic values are. And those basic values cannot be thrown away.
What I see also in other parties in the Netherlands, like I think from Volt, like this kind of pan-European party is this Volt, and I've seen it with even D66, a liberal party in the Netherlands, that they now are thinking about value-based politics. And when I read that, I think, but that's our thing. That's Christian democracy. So maybe, I'm not sure how serious they are. Maybe family is also something that transcends values, because maybe my brother has different values than I have in some aspects. So maybe this is one of the values that we don't talk about a lot, but I guess it's inherent to Christian democracy that you see other people, let's say, as humans, valuable humans, whatever they see the world, they are just as valuable as I am, and I think that's a way forward to come out of conflicts. So I'm not sure if I'm criticizing your statement on values, because it can be. You can talk to people who you're closely related with and find out that you don't share some values. And you can talk to people who share your values and say, well, you're using it in a way that kind of pushes people away. Like, these are my values. If you don't like them, go away. That's not a good thing.
But how does that thought relate to Europe as a concept of values, as a community of values?
So I'm not sure if that's the proper metaphor.
Okay.
Because then it's up in the air what the values are. You could say, well, it's liberty, it's freedom. If you don't sign for these values, you're not part of our family. You see, it can become a bit tricky. Well, if you start with, we are related, we think these values are important, we want to talk about them, but it's not some piece of paper
But what really connects us then as a Europe? If it's not values, and if you can differ about values, what connects us then as a European people or European countries?
Well, maybe Tom can answer it better, because you say something about common destiny, something like this. Nice word. But that's also the family concept, isn't it? We're just here together.
Isn't family about values?
Well, it is partly definitely about values, I think, but then as a red line. This is a red line in values you do not cross.
Yeah.
And above that, we have the discussion on what people think are important, what important values are. But I think what binds us in the European Union is our common destiny, in the sense that we're all here on the same continent. And what also binds us is the way we are confronted with powers from outside. The common challenges in what is our position towards the United States, what is our position towards China, what is our position towards Russia, and that binds us as well. And that is next to values. That also means, how do we shape, in the end, we shape the future of our people? How do we make sure that they remain safe on our continent? How do we make sure that there is prosperity, that there are also jobs in Europe for the future, for next generations? How do we make sure that we hand over our world when it comes to climate, but also when it comes to prosperity, to next generations, that they can live here safely and peacefully as well? And I think that binds us, literally also geographically, that binds us, because this is our part of the world. And we need to work together, we need to cooperate to make sure that we have that common future.
Yes. I agree.
You agree?
Maybe next time ask Arjen first.
No, but it's good. So it makes me think about, I'm reading, so I was married, I'm married 25 years almost, so we visited Florence, and then...
Congratulations.
Yeah, so I should have read a book about Florence before I went there, but I did it afterwards, and I'm reading about Florentine politics in the 15th century, and Machiavelli has written about Florentine politics. And then, of course, his book, Il Principe, the prince, the ruler. And I think this is also maybe a problem of our age. A lot of people recognize in politics a kind of Machiavellian trend that is about power, maybe some narcissism. And then, but Machiavelli writes something great about the Florentine politics of the time. He says, if you don't see people as relatives, you will see them as slaves.
It's or.
If you don't see them as relatives, you see them as slaves. And I think if you look at the problems or the threats, maybe we're worried about tyranny or we have the old specter of fascism, communism. They also had the problems of not seeing people equal as relatives, but seeing them as some people are less than others. So I guess that is helpful. I think but then maybe a question to you is then if we agree on that, how does it help us to move forward, let's say in difficult dossiers like immigration or climate change?
Talk with each other.
Yeah.
And try to understand what the position of the other is. I think for not only for Christian Democrats, but for politics in general, I think we should talk less and listen more. Even how difficult that sometimes is, and also you hear different stories, of course, there are various views. But I think in the end, we need to sit together at the table, we need to listen to each other, and we need to accept that we have a common destiny, common challenges, and cooperate. And it doesn't need to be on a philosophical level as well. If I look at combating climate change, I mean, the European Union has, 7%, 8% of CO2 emission worldwide, which means that the rest of the world needs to join us as well. The only way we can make sure that the rest of the world joins us is that we cooperate very pragmatically on the energy transition and show that it's possible, that it's affordable, that it even creates some economic opportunities, and that it's better if you do it together. That's what we need to do. And I think sometimes a very pragmatic approach, bringing results, visible results of European cooperation to people, for example, an energy transition that we cannot do alone as a small country, but even big countries cannot do on their own. Bringing these concrete results to people, I think that's already very valuable.
What has Christian democracy to offer on this subject when it comes to Europe? Is there a specific approach you choose as a Christian democratic politician?
Well, when it comes to, let's say, combating climate change and the energy, I think the energy transition, that's at the core. It should be at the core of our values. And I think it always has been, but we gave the topic away. Because
also on a European level.
Also on a European level.
So.
Yeah, also on a European level. We gave the topic away to other parties that made that their central point. Well, I think, and why I am in politics, is that we try to make sure that we hand over the will to the next generations. I have 2 little kids, and combating climate change is absolutely one of them. I need to look my son of 3 years old now, when he's 18, I need to be able to look him in the eye and say we did everything we could to make sure that we combated as much as possible, that we adapted as much as possible, and that we changed our energy system. And the difficult thing there is that on one hand it's philosophical, that you hand over the world to the next generation, that you try to make it a bit better than it was. But at the same time, it demands pragmatic solutions. And also there I think that as Christian Democrats we're able to combine our philosophy, our values, with pragmatic solutions that are needed as well.
Clear enough?
I would say also maybe that it's also Europe's defining challenge. It helps also, it makes it probably very clear to people that you need Europe, because climate change is something that you cannot do as a country. You cannot do it by your own. You cannot do it as a country as your own. You need to do it in a European context. I think that's what people are almost waiting for, isn't it? I mean, the Green Deal is a nice word. Like, what is happening on the European level? And probably the threat from outside, like the war in Ukraine, also, I don't want to say helps, because it sounds like it's not a good thing, but it makes clear that there is this security threat to Europe that we need to take serious. Which almost kind of makes it, you don't have to argue why we need Europe. But I'm still worried about climate change, that the most, let's say, the most climate conscious or green conscious people I know are pretty frustrated. Because, I mean, their house is isolated, they have solar panels, but they know it doesn't matter. I mean, it's a good thing to do. It's like
but it doesn't matter because of
it. I don't throw my garbage on the street, but I also know that doesn't help to keep the street clean. I do it because I think it's important, and I think that's the same way people do who do some investment in their house. It's important, but they know that we need national and European efforts Like for example, big companies having a good price for CO2. That the polluter pays, and everybody has the feeling that that's not happening at the moment in a proper way. I know Europe is moving that direction, but maybe you can say something about it. Is it moving fast enough?
No, but what my main concern is currently in let's say in the European cooperation and the way we perceive the way forward, is that we have some really important challenges that can only be solved with European cooperation. So it's combating climate change, but then we need the rest of the world as well. But at least an energy transition that works, we can only do that in European cooperation. Handling migration well, our safety and security is essential, and I think our dependence on other parts of the world when it comes to critical technologies, essential technologies such as batteries and microchips, crucial in our economy of the future, and we're too dependent there. My main concern is that if we do not focus on those main issues, and I see that a lot also from various other parties in the European Parliament as well, that want to have a lot more on the table when it comes to European cooperation, that we lose support in societies as the Netherlands. We lose support under the cooperation we really need in the future.
Yeah.
So we really need to focus on the big things, the big challenges. I think there's much support throughout Europe to do that in cooperation. And I think some need to be less ambitious on all other things to make sure that we really have this support of citizens in all countries for the huge challenges we have before us. Because we need more cooperation on certain issues. We need, especially in security and defense, we need more European cooperation, for example.
Okay, so we talked about values, about some challenges, about family, and perhaps to close this panel, a last question about the European People's Party. We are at the Congress of the EPP. Who are those people? What is the European people? Is there such a thing as a European demos?
I think, I read about it. Tom talked about it maybe also
That's
in
an
the book.
important issue in the book. Yeah.
So when I also work at university, and when I'm here today, so when people ask me where I'm going, I'm saying I'm going to the European People's Congress. I like to say that because it sounds like the Chinese People's Congress. And at the Chinese People Congress, I'm not saying the Chinese parties are example, but their Congress, like people come up dressed as from their own tradition, from all parts of China. So maybe if we want this to be a real European People's Party, European People's Congress, why not use it then that way? We don't do it right now. It's more, the stands are great, by the way, the Dutch experience and things like that. But to show that, hey, this is European peoples coming together in some
diversity
way.
of Europe.
Yeah, I don't know what form. I don't know whether we have to dress up in klederdracht. What's that in English? Klederdracht?
Traditional clothing.
Traditional clothing, that's what they do in China. Well, maybe this would help to find out that we are not Brussels bureaucrats, but we are European peoples. And I think we want to be that, but maybe that would help to get a little bit out of the Brussels bubble, to find a way to make that Congress into a thing like that.
Really a people's
symbolic thing, yeah.
I totally agree, and if you ask who are these people, it's such a diverse group.
Yeah.
But we should maintain that diversity. We should be proud of that diversity.
Yeah.
And I think that's something we should embrace as EPP as well. And what I also think, I know it's not a very popular thing to say, I think it's very healthy for the EPP to be less powerful than we were. Because now we're less powerful in the European Parliament.
We need to work harder.
We need to work harder, and we need to listen more also to others. If you have too much power, it's never good.
No.
And I really hope that in this new phase in Europe, where we are not as big as anymore, we need to bring more and better ideas to the table. We need to cooperate more. We need to listen more to others. And I think in the end, that's also something that suits us, also because of our diversity. And I'm really looking forward to that.
Sometimes people are saying when there's more power to the EU, that also will unite people more. You disagree with that, if I hear well?
Well, I was mostly talking about the situation where the EPP ruled the EU a bit together with the socialists.
So the power of the
EPP, I think in the end, it's not a discussion about whether the EU needs to have more power or the EU needs to be more integrated, etc. I think the EU needs to deliver concrete results to citizens on the main challenges that you cannot act on your own. I think that's essential. And if you do not deliver these concrete results, people will not believe you and people will not believe in the EU. If you deliver concrete results, their safety, their prosperity, less dependency on other parts of the world, I think combating climate change, I think then we will have the support for this European cooperation of this very diverse group we have in the European Union.
Cool.
Yeah. So it's all about diversity when you will make it about the people.
Well, maybe it's about diversity, but also about trust. And if trust is trust in politics, maybe in different spheres or the financial sector, whatever, trust is low, seems to be low. And how do you regain trust? It's probably by doing. It's a bit hard to say it, but maybe you need to do little things or have like what you say, concrete things. Don't be over ambitious, but do the things and show people this is what the EU does and it works. And everybody knows like the mobile phones that you can use 4G everywhere. I think this is the best selling point for the EU ever. People know this, and yeah, I think you're right that you need to do. Maybe you need to be less ambitious in a funny way, but more ambitious in actually getting it right, doing the hard work.
Doing the right things.
And I'm thinking about high-speed rail. I don't know if that is the future, because flying is still very efficient, but it's not good for the climate. High-speed rail is tough to get done, and everybody knows it. But the risk is that we all talk about it, or the European Commission talks about it, we want this, but then not a lot happens, and that's not good for trust. Like either you do the hard work or you don't.
Yeah. Well, it's the same with, for example, the energy transition. If we really cooperate on a European level and we connect all the energy systems physically, then we can really combat this challenge together.
Yeah.
But as long as the Netherlands decides, I think rightfully decides, to invest more in nuclear, and at the other side of the border in Belgium and Germany, nuclear plants are closed, that is not at all European cooperation. There's no ID behind it, and I think on those common challenges, we need concrete results.
Yeah. Okay, so lots of work to do for the EU. Thank you, gentlemen, for joining me in this panel.
Yeah.
And we hope of a wonderful Congress for the days to come.
Thank you for having us.
I'm very glad to have everyone in Rotterdam.
Yeah.
Thanks to our discussants, and thank you, André. Don't forget to mention your impressions on your social media channels using hashtag United for Europe and We Stand with Democracy. And now it's time to take a short break before we resume with our second panel of the day, European Economic Forecast. See you at 11:30. Dear audience, welcome back. A friendly reminder that you can also join the debate by using the hashtag United for Europe. Our next discussion will be about European economic forecast, priorities for the Union's economy. To tackle this and other points, I'd like to introduce to you Dr. Eoin Drea, Senior Research Officer at the Martens Center, who will moderate the upcoming panel. Eoin, over to you.
Thank you, Sandra, and welcome to the debate, everybody. As Sandra said, I'm Dr. André from the Martens Center, and I'm very happy to be back in person at the EPP Congress this year. I'm very happy also that we're joined by, I think, two of the EPP MEPs who are central to, I think, developing, EPP principles and developing an EPP narrative as we move forward to the 2024 elections. On my left is a very good friend of the Martens Center, MEP Siegfried Mureşan, who is a member of both the Budget and the Econ committees in the Parliament and a Vice President of the EPP. And on my right, I'm very happy to welcome MEP Luděk Niedermayer from Top 09 in Czechia, and he is Vice Chair of the Econ Committee in the European Parliament. So I think we're well covered on a range of different areas. We only have about 20-25 minutes, so I don't think there's any need to set the context. I think everybody kind of understands the kind of economic situation that we're in at the moment. So maybe MEP Mureşan, if I could start with you, I guess, what do you think are the most kind of serious economic impacts that are arising from from COVID and now from the war in Ukraine?
Firstly, thank you. Thank you very much, Eoin. Good to be back with the Martens Center. Good to see you all, dear colleagues, and good to share the stage also with Luděk, who is our colleague and very active in the Econ committee in the European Parliament. The invasion of Russia into Ukraine surprised many, but the truth is Putin had been telling us for 15 years that for him the collapse of the Soviet Union was the biggest tragedy of the 20th century. Czechia, Georgia in 2008, Ukraine 2014-15, Crimea, and so on, and now again. So it was a shock, and obviously it was a shock for the economy as well. Yeah. What we are witnessing is particularly long-term, large investments being questioned, being put on hold in several sectors, firstly. Secondly, disruptions in chains of productions, where transport routes or where eventual products are needed, certain supply chains are disrupted. And then, of course, agriculture. Ukraine and Russia were major suppliers of agricultural products to EU member states, but also to countries in the region. And these supplies are now missing, particularly because production was disrupted in Ukraine, but specifically now because they cannot export through the harbors at the Black Sea, which are not safely controlled, unfortunately, now by Ukrainians. So this is why food security is an issue, and specifically also food affordability, because if there is scarcity, of course, prices are likely to increase for us in the EU, but also for neighboring countries. And we need to care about neighboring countries as well. Countries in our eastern neighborhood, the Republic of Moldova, a country with a small GDP per capita, a country which received the biggest number of refugees in comparison to its population from all European countries. So increase of prices in agricultural products or in pesticides, in fertilizers, which were coming from Ukraine or from Russia, can lead to disruptions. And we need a stable neighborhood. We can only be stable within the borders if our neighborhood is stable as well. So food security in the east, but also in the south. Lebanon imported 40% of the wheat from Ukraine. So if we're looking to the statistics overall, different dependencies might not be very big, but if we're looking at individual countries, individual economic sectors, dependencies might be big. Also when it comes to exports from our countries into Russia, Belarus and Ukraine, overall not significant, but in some sectors some companies might be affected. And food security in the eastern neighborhood of the EU is very important to us as well, because we all know what people do if they do not have enough enough to eat in Africa, they come to Europe. And it won't matter that we already have 4 or 5 million Ukrainian refugees. We will have 4 or 5 million refugees from the African continent as well. If there is scarcity for agricultural products, this is why we need to support there as well.
Yeah, thank you, Siegfried. MEP Niedermayer, MEP Mureşan, mentioned rising food prices. I think it's something that everybody can relate to because they see it in the local shops. But that, I suppose, is part of the wider trend of more general inflation. I think we saw new figures come out for Germany. I think it's approaching 8% now. But I think possibly what is not always understood in Western Europe is also what's happening in Central and Eastern Europe, where many of the member states now have double-digit inflation levels. So I was just wondering, in terms of the economic impact and in terms of the response, given your background also as a central banker, kind of how do we navigate a way through this kind of situation?
So obviously inflation is very dangerous for the economy because it doesn't only undermine the economic growth and causing the disruption in the society, because it's very likely that people with lower income will suffer a deeper decline of their real income compared to the others. So there is kind of reallocation of the wealth that is, I guess, not very good for the society. But obviously, in the long run, the biggest risk is inflation inertia. So that means that people will have the higher inflation expectation, and this is especially very dangerous when inflation is approaching double digits or not even exceeding, because to build in your expectation that inflation is around 10% is very easy. So that's why we are in very delicate situation. And obviously, you can do a lot of things to get inflation under control. Obviously, to finish that terrible Russian aggression would help, but this is not in our hands. Also, we cannot repair the supply chains. As Siegfried talked about it, they are seriously distorted. What we can do, obviously, to reduce the bottlenecks in the local economies that are increasing inflation, like inefficient labor market and so on. But at the end of the day, you will have to get into the situation when you reduce the demand. And obviously, a reduction of the demand would put the recovery, the COVID recovery of the economy under danger. So this is a very delicate situation. On one hand, one is concerned really to take the measures that will reduce the demand. But on the other hand, if we fail to stabilize the inflation expectation and push them down to reasonable level, let's say definitely below 5%, then we can get into very difficult economic period.
And it's interesting, I think, is that in a sense you have kind of a Europe divided in two, an EU, because within the Eurozone, obviously, lots of worries about, a possible recession, interest rates still in negative territory. But then when you go to EU non-Eurozone countries, I think inflation or interest rates in Poland and Czechia are already between 5 and 6%.
Yeah.
So I was just wondering, just specifically in terms of Central and Eastern Europe, do you think, interest rates are already at 5%? If they go even higher, will that have, a sufficient impact to dampen demand, or do you think?
You should not forget that obviously these countries have advantage to use the monetary policy, but as well they are in the danger of depreciating of the currency. So obviously the first goal is to not allow depreciation of the currency, because if your currency depreciate, then obviously you don't not only import inflation from Eurozone, but you add something on the top of that. So that's why you are a little bit forced to really look at the interest rates and make sure that currency is stable. Jury is still on, because the many countries like Czech Republic start to use the monetary policy early. Yeah. So on one hand, we could have opportunity to get inflation under control quicker, but obviously at certain economic cost, no doubt about it. But so far, I could not say so far so good, because our inflation is significantly higher than average of the Eurozone. So I am not sure if the non-euro member states will be better off. What you can say for sure, higher interest rate means that the savings are less eaten by the inflation. So people have a little bit of chance to recover some losses, but looking at the Czech situation when inflation is above 14% and the interest rate is 5%, the erosion of your saving is bigger than in the Eurozone with 0 interest and 7% inflation. But obviously at the same time, higher interest costs would undermine the recovery of the investments, for example. Yeah. So it's double-edged sword. You cannot say that we are better off. Jury is still on, and we will see in a year or two who will manage interest rate better. Nevertheless, I believe that major central banks are too slow to react. Yeah. It would be much more appropriate, in my view, really to take some measures, not drastic measures, but to take some measures and not wait for too long.
Okay. And Siegfried, this brings me back to you because, as the EPP, as a political group, we focus a lot on, fiscal sustainability. Mm-hmm. So I was just wondering, how would you respond to those people then who would ask for further flexibility in the EU's fiscal rules, be it to deal with COVID, be it to deal with the conflict in Ukraine?
Look, the truth is the following. At the beginning of the COVID crisis, we launched the biggest package of economic support ever launched at European level, 750 billion euros. We branded it Next Generation EU, money for the recovery and the resilience of the economies affected by COVID. Lots of money. But the truth is that we are now, by 750 billion euros, more indebted than we were 2 years ago at the beginning of the COVID crisis. And this matters in the eyes of the financial markets because that needs to be paid back in good and in bad economic times. So, of course, after the invasion into Ukraine, there were calls to spend more on defense, on energy efficiency, to support Ukraine. Many of these things we need to do without any doubt, and we will need to find ways to do. But what I want to say is that now maybe is not the best time to discuss about questioning the complete Stability and Growth Pact, because if we are holding this debate now, the call for spending more will be so big, I'm afraid the left, which is always advocating for spending more, in comparison to us, which we are responsible and prudent when it comes to budgets and finances, because it's people's money and we have to manage it with care. I'm afraid that the left would have an advantage now, because people are now in the mood of, spending for defense, for Ukraine, for energy efficiency, and so on. So this is why I think it would be wiser, particularly because we do not yet know all of the consequences of the war upon our economy. It would be wiser not to overspend, not to over-indebt ourselves, to support where needed, and particularly to make use of the tools that we have from the Recovery and Resilience Facility. There is still 220 billion euros of money not yet accessed for loans. Member states need to see if they can access it, and they can use it, particularly for cross-border transnational energy infrastructure projects, improve energy efficiency, reduce energy dependency. So what I'm saying is use the tools that we have, don't question the rules, don't invent new tools, because until new tools become operational, it takes time always. And don't go now into a debate which is a bit, would be, emotional, on questioning all of the fiscal rules in Europe right now, because I'm afraid we would be in a minority on the defensive towards the left. I would rather say, let's have this debate in 1 year when things are calmer and when we also see the impact of the war upon our economies.
Yeah, and I think what's interesting when you mentioned the unused money from the money that hasn't been utilized yet from the recovery fund is, when we think of kind of the characteristics of the conflict in Ukraine, is that I think back to President Juncker when he was president of the Commission and the original Energy Union proposals, the need for interconnection between EU member states. So I think there's a lot we can do within the EU.
And it's in the interest of all of us, because, having LNG terminals in Spain is clear that we need to connect Spain with France, the Iberian Peninsula, with the rest of Europe, so that we can ship and move the energy from where it is to where it is needed. So any interconnector, infrastructure project, no matter where it is in Europe, it will help all of us at the end of the day. But of course, needless to say, transition to green economy, renewable sources, and so on. This is something that we need to continue.
Okay. Mr. Niedermayer, I know that you work a lot on kind of, developing a taxation system, developing a fair and equitable taxation model that can drive growth and enterprise as we enter, hopefully, the recovery period eventually. So I was just wondering, in terms of, in your opinion, what should be kind of the characteristics, or, what should be the EPP focus in terms of reforming the taxation system as we move forward?
So, after the COVID, and obviously after also this period of economic problems, the countries will emerge with substantial deficits. But we in the EPP especially, we know that it's not a solution to increase the tax rates, because you can hardly, you are just discussing which tax is more negative for the growth and which one is even more negative for the growth, This is not solution, so that's why I believe that wide tax base and effective collection of the taxes is a very important goal, even more than before. Big game changer are the digital technologies, because digital technologies can not only help to collect taxes better, but also substantially reduce cost of the businesses. I believe, and this is also reflected in my work in the parliament, that especially SMEs and smaller firms, the cost of tax compliance is very high. Very high cost compliance is for small or medium-sized firms that are operating across Europe. So that means that we can reduce the tax burdens by reducing the cost of compliance, and at the same time, obviously, allow firms to grow better. So this is one of the agenda. But let me go also to fiscal angle a little bit, because I guess compared to situation 12, 18 months ago, we are in different universe. Not only because of that terrible Russian aggression, but also we find that economy is stronger than we thought. Probably Evie would know that economy will emerge from the COVID as strong as it is now. We would probably fine-tune certain variable differently, but given that terrible situation in energy security, I guess we should do what Siegfried to some extent advised, that we should reallocate this money to go for something that is now very important priority, not only from the energy security point of view, but also strategically with the decarbonization. So I guess there should be urgent call not only to use the money responsible way, so that means to get from the money the best value, but also to cover the priority that we have no idea about 12 months ago, and they should be addressed. And we are to some extent fortunate that we have very substantial amounts of the money that can be used by the member states, but we must really think about every euro, how we spend it to deliver the value for the economy and for Europeans.
Mm-hmm. Siegfried, we're coming up very close to the end. Maybe just a final question for you. I sometimes think in the debates about the economy and Europe's economy that the situation that you mentioned in your opening contribution gets overlooked, which is the situation in Moldova. And I was just wondering, maybe, because I know you're very plugged in, maybe, is there anything more that the EU can do to help Moldova in its current situation?
Look, we can only live in safety and stability within the borders of the European Union if in our immediate neighborhood we are surrounded by countries which are safe and stable. This is why what happens in Ukraine is relevant to all of us. This, we finally understood and learned in the last months. And this is why we have to do all we can to contribute also to the perspective of prosperity in those countries. Ukraine, the Republic of Moldova, they have deep and comprehensive free trade agreements with the European Union, but I think we can do more. If we work towards them joining the single market, then it will be easier for European companies to invest there. It will be easier for them to export their goods to the European market. Plus, they would take over, as they implement the acquis communautaire, they would take over European standards of environment, of consumer protection. So you would see an increase in quality of life of people right there. So what I'm saying is we should see, yes, we need to support them financially, a Marshall Plan for Ukraine, but we need to see how we can help them to develop, out of their own economic activity. Of course, in Ukraine, subject to the war somehow concluding at some point. Financial support was given to Ukraine, was given to the Republic of Moldova. For the Republic of Moldova, the amounts that they need are small in comparison to what we can do. The president of the country told us at an EPP event that what the Republic of Moldova needs until the end of this year in support is 300 million euros. This is something which I believe is worth, making available in order to make sure that the pro-European government, EPP president in that country, do well also politically. Because what would the situation be today if in addition to Lukashenko in Belarus, Putin would have a pro-Russian president in the Republic of Moldova, This is why support there doesn't cost us much and it contributes to the stability of the EU as a whole as well.
Okay, thank you, Siegfried. I'll just finish up with MEP Niedermayer. Got a lot of things happening in the EPP, in the family, the group and the party coming closer together. So I was just wondering, as we start, I guess, to think about the 2024 elections and in terms of developing a narrative, what you think maybe, 2 or 3 of the key economic priorities should be?
I guess maybe there is only one main priority that was tested in, I would say, almost in the last decade. There are things that will happen and we have no idea about it. We were surprised by the intensity of refugees crisis. We were surprised obviously by COVID, by now war in Ukraine. And there is one clear lesson. If we act together, decisively, quickly, we win.
Yeah.
If we not agree, if we fail to agree, we lose. And this is the same for the economy. I guess we must really look, obviously in climate, I hope we are going together, and I believe we win. And now the biggest threat is really security, energy security. I guess that we should come with the vision of energy union, the system that will make sure that everyone in Europe will be protected by everyone. So to build effective system that will include the investments into infrastructure, but also legal system that will assure the solidarity across the EU. EU on its own can assure that there will be, for example, enough gas in Europe, and we must make sure that this gas will be distributed across to Europe to every end of the pipe, not only to the beginning. So I guess this should be the main message. Otherwise, EPP is very clear that we want to make economy strong.
Yeah.
We want to reduce the bottlenecks, and this is what Siegfried said, there is no option to responsible fiscal policy.
Yeah.
Irresponsible policy means only shifting the burden to other generations. And we understand that this is wrong in climate, this is also wrong in other areas.
Okay, thank you very much. MEPs, I know you're very busy today and have to go, so I'll wrap up the panel, and Sandra, I'll pass it back to you.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you, panelists, and thank you, Eoin. Dear viewers online and here in Spot, let me remind you that we are live streaming all of our debates, and you can watch them on the Martens Center YouTube site or on our official website, martenscenter.eu. We will break now for 30 minutes, but meet you again at 12:30, where we are going to discuss the Green New Future. See you later. Hello again and welcome. It's 12:30 sharp and it's time for our third panel of the day, A Green New Future, Balancing Energy Security, Sustainability and Social Justice. Peter Hefele, Policy Director of the Martens Center, will step now into moderator shoes and will lead you through this very interesting debate. Peter, we are all ears.
Yeah, ladies and gentlemen, thanks, Sandra, very much for these kind words of introduction. I'm very pleased to have you here in the room as well as on the screen. The European Green Deal, Jessica, is coined as the European hallmark by the European presidency von der Leyen, and it's a fundamental transformation in production, in consumption, the whole way we think about our future prosperity. And of course, it shall not only contribute to the economic power of Europe, it's also an issue of global and normative power to some extent, what model of development we are going to develop. Well, but you know, not least to the events in Ukraine, we have this discussion whether we can follow this track or we have to step back, and there are other priorities now, or should we, quite the contrary, speed up this whole process to decrease our vulnerability, our resilience, and of course get new opportunities, economic opportunities, and let aside the social issue, which is an issue of this, what we call now, just transition. And I think, Jessica, the future political success of our family is very much depending on the topic whether we are able to develop a new narrative giving convincing answers to our audience. So I'm very glad to have you here. Let me just shortly introduce you. You are the EPP since 2019 in the European Parliament. You're from the Swedish sister party Moderaterna, and you are a member of the Committee of the Environment, the Public Health and the Food Safety, but you're also in other committees as a substitute in the Economic Monetary Affairs, in the Committee on Employment and Social Affairs. So who better could we have here to discuss these very complex issues of green just transition? In the next 20 minutes, we are going to discuss a bit the current challenges we are facing, and it's not just the war in Ukraine, there are more complex issues behind, but it's also an issue to discuss what does it mean, for example, on the national level in your country. You're facing now elections in late summer in September, and well, on the European level, ladies and gentlemen, we are facing the elections 2020-40. So let's see what we are going to develop from part of the EPP. I think this is an uphill battle. Strong narratives are to be developed. So let's immediately dig into the topic. Start with the Russian war in Ukraine and what it means for Europe in terms of energy, in terms of green transformation. Do you see in your constituency, in your party, changes in the discussions? Have priorities shifted?
Yes, of course, we are all affected by the war in Ukraine, and we can see that when we talk about the climate, we can see that when we talk about energy, and of course for Sweden this has started a new debate about NATO. I know that we will not talk about NATO today, but we have now decided as a country to be try to be a member of the NATO, and I think that has also been a discussion, of course, but I think that there are new topics as well that has been more highlighted. Of course, the dependency. I don't think that the general Swede maybe understood how dependent we are of Ukraine, for example, and we can see from the farming side, the farmers how to both manage and how to cope. But I would also mention what we have the self-sufficient. What we produce in Sweden. I think the only thing that we are self-sufficient is carrots or something like that. So I do think that this has also been a more security kind of topic. Maybe before it was not connected and linked to that discussion. But of course, the energy prices and so on. And I think it is important for the European Parliament and the countries to stay on message here, that we will not back down. Putin will not set the agenda, not in security policy, but neither in climate policy. So I think it's really important to still be ambitious and to have the timeline that we had lined out from the beginning. So we will still follow. I think that we could show during COVID that this democratic institution is working even if we are threatened and we can see a pandemic. And I think it's the most important thing that we can do as a parliament, really to stand up for democracy and really show that we will not back down.
But I think it has also shown us that policy is way more complex than some, well, naive people rather think that we just have to focus, for example, on emission reduction. It's a very complex transformation, and then the topic of security has gained a new importance. Not that we had not discussed this before, but I think the priorities have shifted, and I think it's an important issue for the EPP also to stick there and show that we are the party which are competent in this field.
Exactly, and I think that sometimes we have a little bit of a bad confidence when it comes to climate issues. But I do think EPP has the best position. We are not in denial, we are not activists, but we do have a science-based, fact-based position in the middle. And what we can see from elections during the last years, I think that every party needs to have answers to the climate change. And we can see the parliament now. It has a leftist majority. And we are still the largest party group, but that doesn't matter if we have no friends. And we can see that things are going in the wrong direction because we have the wrong majority. And if EPP wants to have power in the future, we do have to have answers to these questions. And we cannot see them as just hygienic factors. So I think that we really have to be confident and to show Europe that we are the best climate party and really to have the solutions in the future.
I will be back to this issue of the narratives, the story we have to tell. Let's go a bit further on into what it can mean for opportunities. This is a thing we have to sell, I think, to our voters. Take for your country, maybe, for example. Sweden is also in a process of transformation on energy issues, but also on demographic challenges. So many things come together, which you have to see as a package, I would say. And where do you see the opportunities and, well, the elections ahead in your country? This is, I think you have already dealt with these topics.
Yes, we do have the election coming up in September, so of course we do have the discussion about environmental issues as well, even though we can see the voters do think that this is a priority with energy crisis and so on. So I think it really has a high standard right now among the citizens. But of course there is some frightening with transition. But I do think that Sweden, for example, can show that it's possible to have an economic and green transition at the same time. What we are seeing right now is that the green transition is really forming new societies and new possibilities and new jobs. Because there is always not an excuse, but an explanation why you can't speed up, because we are losing jobs, there will be unemployment. But we can see now that we have, for example, battery factories establishing plants in the north of Sweden. And for being a rural area where people didn't want to live there, they moved to bigger cities. And now we have the other way around, that they attract they need skills, they need more workforce. And this is really the prices of the houses are exploding, and they have not seen this in so many years. So there's a bit of hope in those areas as well. And I think that sometimes we talk about the green transition like it's something that will come ahead in the future. But it's here, it's happening now. And I could just also mention what we are doing at the moment with the steel industry, for example, with the cement industry, that they have also seen that we are the bigger polluters. We don't want to do that. We don't want to be that. We do want to contribute, and that we try now and have come quite far to make steel-free, not steel-free, but fossil-free steel.
You work as a member of the European Parliament, but still have deep roots in your country. Where do you see Europe can support this transformation process? Are we too much in regulations, as some say? Should it be going down, a more bottom-up approach? Where do you see the strengths, maybe also the critical approaches by the Commission, for example?
I could just take one example. I am the rapporteur for the ESR, which is the effort sharing regulation, which has the regulation for the emissions not included in the ETS. And there we wanted to higher the ambitions for every country. Like we had countries that had none ambition. They didn't have to lower their emissions at all. So we raised them, and we were careful to say that it's within your competence to tell us how. So we will not be sector specific, that you have to do this and you have to do this. And I think that is when politics works, that you give the frames, but you do take into account national differences and national possibilities.
Let's go beyond the national, the European space, so to say. In security terms, we are now seeking desperately for partners around the world, not just in Europe or the transatlantic, but also in Asia. Do you see this as a field of cooperation for the field of transformation as well?
I mean, it's necessary. Of course, we can always lead by example from the European side and show what is doable and that we really can change. And we have new innovation, we have new techniques and possibilities in that sense. But of course, China, India, they have to step up, and we will not gain. It will not gain the future if we will still be importing emissions from other countries. So I think the dialogue has to go on, and we are, for example, negotiating and voting for the CBAM, for example, to see what...
That's a topic I wanted and I have to mention indeed, because there's a lot of concern that it is a green wall, a green protectionism we are building up. How do you see we can bring in the necessary things? On one side, we have to carbon price. I think otherwise we will not have any change, but not excluding our partners, and in particular to the developing world. Where do you see, it's a market issue, it's a trade issue to some extent. I think there are several points we have to discuss in this respect.
And of course, that's the balance point, whether this is compatible with the WTO. And of course, we always want, as EPP, to be trade friendly and see what can we do. But I also see that we will not bring in other dependencies. Like now, for example, we're talking about the solar energy and the solar panels. And I think the largest producer of solar panels are from China, for example. So I think that we really have to focus on the trade for being also green, but not lower the ambitions from the European side to import other the products from that have a worse energy and maybe more emission prints.
Well, it's not only about imbalances or inequalities on a global scale. Even within Europe, we have huge differences, different strategies. Take Germany, leaving nuclear power out of the equation, others heavily forcing now to rebuild this capacity. Where do you see Europe in balancing? Is this the right approach we have with directives, for example, or do you think that more market-driven processes should be in place?
It's a bit surprisingly looking in the back mirror, maybe, that Germany chose to shut down the nuclear and keep the coal, but and the gas. But I think that we have to do now is really to see what all the different energy could provide us with. We can see that we are talking about the electrification of society and so on, and that will demand more energy. And from Sweden as well, we can see the products from the forest, for example, that we really want to have into the energy mix. And we can see in some parts that it's excluded and not may be evaluated in the same way. So I think there is, of course, national competence how your energy mix would be in the future, but we can see that the fossil-free solutions would benefit. And of course, I'm in favor of nuclear power. So.
As many other European countries, I just attended an event on small and medium-sized enterprises, which is an important part, and also our narrative at the EPP is to strengthen these innovation capacities. Again, taking the example of your country, where do you see these small and medium enterprises have a chance? How they have to be supported, maybe in a better way?
Yes, it's all, of course, all SMEs, not only within these areas, that we think that we should have a good environment for them to be possible to be larger companies within the European market and also exporters. But I was thinking about this is a very personal reflection, but I was homesick a couple of months ago, and I never look at the advertising. You tend to skip that part. But I was surprised that every company that was advertising had a green twist. That no one today really market themselves without the green environmental touch. So being the EPP, I do think that we also have to trust the consumer-driven market, that they will ask for more environmental-friendly products and services. So therefore, I think SMEs also have a chance to do so. And we can see, I know that it's not the European Parliament that will have the biggest solutions for the climate change. It's really the innovation that comes from smaller and medium-sized companies. So I think that is a big contributor.
Let's look a bit into the future. Well, future means for us elections in Sweden, yes. For you in particular, and the big elections on European level. So we have 1.5 years of time to work on that topics. What would be the most important topics you would like to focus in your work, and maybe tell the party a bit where we should work upon?
I would just start with maybe not the content, but the feeling. I think that it's so important for EPP to show that it's possible, that it's doable, and we can show hope. Because all the activists, and I am from the same country as Greta Thunberg, I know that she has not the solutions, she has the questions, she has the problems. And this always guilt and shame connected to the environmental issues, but I do think the most important thing that we can do is to show that we think that there is solutions. We can do this. We have to work hard and we have to be ambitious, but we have to also trust in science, in new technologies and so on. So I think therefore it's really a responsibility from our side to be more hopeful and to lead the way in that sense. And I usually give an example. When there was a climate conference in the United Nations, all the cameras were at Greta Thunberg. But in a room, in a conference room, we had a Swedish CEO who has the solution for the fossil-free steel. And I think that if the cameras were a team, maybe we could have another discussion. And when we find ourselves in the middle of forest fires, flooding, and etc., we will see the consequences. But I think that we really have to be prepared at an earlier stage. And I also think that it's good that we have the discussion, and I think that the Ukraine war has also highlighted this with the energy crisis and dependence on Russia. So I think there are so many ways that we could be trustworthy as a party and as a party group in Europe. And of course, I think that it's also important to connect this to economic growth and to industry and trade.
We will have now 1.5 hour days of discussion here at the Congress. Well, there's a lot of things regarding the elections of presidency and so on. But what do you expect from the discussions here in Rotterdam?
Of course, as I am interested in all these topics and that we have now the big ambition for the 55 package, I think that, of course, it's good to have that in mind when we are just discussing our new strategies ahead. And I think it is an important and crucial factor for, like I started with, mentioning that if we want to be a powerful party and to win elections, to really have the possibility in all the issues, in, for example, the European Parliament, we need to have the answers. And otherwise, I mean, young people today, they will not, they will look at this and decide how to vote.
This is indeed something which I would like to conclude, also to some extent, also bringing the role of the Martens Center into discussion, because as the think tank of the European Parliament, it's also up to us, and then we have these competences in linking different fields of policies together, from energy to security, from digitalization, which is an own topic in this transformation process we could discuss maybe at another occasion. But ladies and gentlemen, I'm very delighted that you attended this conversation here, and well, please follow also our publication, this topics. There's plenty of opportunity to discuss. We want to engage with you as a member of parliament to be part of the discussion. Vice versa, we are very delighted that you support as well our work. Having that said, thank you so much for joining us. And I would like now to hand over to Sandra as the master of the ceremony. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you, Peter. Thank you, Jessica. An applause. Thank you again for joining us also in yet another interesting debate. I would like to invite you now kindly to a virtual lunch break. We'll break now until 3:30, when we're going to be resuming our next 3 panels for the day. In the meantime, to keep this debate lively, please do visit our social media channels and join the debate by using the hashtag United for Democracy, for Europe. Thank you, and see you at 3:30.